everybody. I'm Nicole Harris Roberts with Vinyl, and I'm so pleased to be here today with our guest, Brady Harrison. He is a senior data analyst at Count, and today he'll be talking to us about the economics of financial cybercrime. Welcome, Brady, to Boise Startup Week. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about fraud. Super interesting topic that reaches into a bunch of different parts of not only our digital but physical kind of interactions and lives. And so, really excited today to talk about how financial cybercrime occurs, why it's a great funding round or funding option for criminal enterprises, as well as how does it actually happen and what is really required for me to go from stolen credentials or goods into cash, and then what I can do with that cash. And then finally, what business owners or technology companies can do to mitigate that risk.
This is something that as entrepreneurs, we don't tend to think a lot about depending on our business model. But I think for the audience, and we have a lot of students in the audience as well who may be wondering, what do you mean when you say financial cybercrime? And where do you find this occurring typically in the marketplace?
Yeah, great question. And so financial cybercrime is really motivated by people taking some kind of digital asset, or at least asset that exists in a digital format, and then converting that into cash, or what we call monetization. And so that monetization traditionally has been stolen credit cards, or that's a credit card gets compromised. I use that to buy stolen goods. In the past couple of years, we've really seen as merchants and companies have hardened up their payment infrastructure, that fraudulent activity or financial cybercrime, committing financial crimes online, have transitioned to other areas or parts of your business or businesses. From a loyalty program, where if you have loyalty points, let's say in a quick service restaurant app, or your airline miles, digital game currency, where digital game currency can be bought and sold on third-party marketplaces, as well as just the accounts in and of themselves. And so each of these are quite different in the way that they're attacked or the way that they're sold, but all of them are some kind of financial opportunity where I can take my digital expertise, convert that into some good that has value, and then resell that or monetize that good somewhere else on the internet or sometimes in person. And so, in short, financial cybercrime is really taking some kind of digital asset from your business or digital payment, and then converting that or monetizing that via some kind of illegal means. This is separate than what we would see of monetizing digital goods, say with like a Patreon or other digital options, where selling or moving those things with permission is well within the course of the ecosystem. This is really stealing things that don't belong to you.
Who do you typically see as the bad actors in this equation?
So traditionally, we've seen it be pretty large scale organized groups, as it takes a high level of expertise, security, knowledge, opportunity, and really the rationalization to do so. As there's the kind of democratization of the internet and learning online, we've seen this shift as we've seen some breaking up of the fraud ecosystem, where in the past, one group might be responsible for a nose to tail compromise, from compromising the cards, using and validating those credentials, selecting a target, and then reselling all within the same organization. We've seen specialization in the industry, if you will, in the fraud industry, of people might take only one part of it. So they might compromise accounts, they might take over accounts, they might hack, right? So they're only really doing one thing. And so the people who are doing it has changed slightly from an organizational basis to more individual. That is said, their organizations still do exist, state-funded or highly organized criminal organizations that engage in this behavior is common. You can look at instances in North Korean attacks against Bangladeshi banks as really a coordinated attack in this realm. But really, the who breaks down into they need kind of three main concepts. And there's a concept in the literature about the fraud diamond. The fraud diamond is really that they need rationalization, that they need some kind of justification while they're committing this act that is functionally immoral, right? They're stealing something that doesn't belong to them. That can be that, that this company is so profitable, it doesn't matter, right? They're not going to notice. They put it into their budget. Oh, I'm really having a hard time right now. And so that $100 is going to make the difference for me. There's also incentive, right? That's the more real world terms of, um, hey, I have an addiction, gambling, drugs, some kind of financial dire straits that really incentivize people into this behavior. And then lastly, there's opportunity. And so the opportunity to do so, right? You could have all the desire and rationalization in the world to commit this crime, but if you don't have the opportunity, it's going to be quite difficult to successfully monetize. Um, Later, they expanded on this concept, and that it's really became a diamond, and that the final thing is that we actually need capability. Um, it's great that you could have the opportunity, incentive, and rationalization to rob a bank, but if you can't get it done, if you don't have the capability to do so, it's going to be quite difficult. And so, from a fraud perspective, capability used to be a pretty high barrier in launching a successful attack. That said, again, with the democratization of the internet and tools, capability is becoming a lower and lower threshold. But those are really the four things that a fraudster or a fraud group needs in order to start. Um, we need to rationalize what we're doing. We have some goal, political or otherwise financial in mind. We need to have the incentive, opportunity to actually make it happen, which the threat surface or the opportunity is abounds on the internet. As more of our interactions move online, there's no limit to opportunity. And then finally, capability. And we can see with high levels of tech literacy that that's becoming less and less of a barrier. So really the who is pretty much anyone. They just need these kind of four kind of criteria to get started. And as we can see with COVID and local economic conditions and global economic conditions, we have plenty of rationalization, incentive, and opportunity. So the only limit now is really capability for a large group of people.
And we'll talk about the opportunity piece of it, meaning what companies can do to make them to lessen those opportunities
Mm.
in a little bit. I want to get back to, you mentioned some incentives that people have in order to do this, to pursue this line of credit, if you will. What are some common reasons why these criminals are using fraud to essentially raise money for their enterprises?
Uh, to be frank, because it's not that hard, number one. In terms of four main areas, really, there's minimal capital costs, there's minimal knowledge required compared to other opportunities, minimal physical infrastructure, and minimal legal risk. And so, really, capital cost, it doesn't cost very much to get started, right? If you have other traditional illicit forms of financing your operation, like scams or uh, running drugs, like trade invoicing, right? All of that stuff, it takes quite a bit of capital cost to just get started. And so with fraud, for a couple $100, you can buy the tools, username and passwords for uh, websites, credit cards, right? They're quite inexpensive. And so your first day, or we like to think of time to value for your first $100 is very, very, very short. And your first $1,000 is probably even shorter. A stolen credit card is maybe 50 cents, a dollar, which then we can monetize that into potentially hundreds or thousands of dollars, right? Compared to buying a farm to start your drug organization, it's significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
An extension of that, though, is knowledge, right? Um, if you need to open a smuggling ring, you need to know logistics, distribution, how to smuggle, laundering, right? There's a really, really high level of knowledge that's required in order to be successful. In that, these are pretty mature endeavors compared to cybercrime. And so our enforcement mechanisms and our ability to kind of identify this behavior is pretty robust. And so, in terms of the knowledge it takes to circumvent and not get caught and be successful and make money, is comparatively low to other opportunities. Physical infrastructure, the same way. These can be run off of a laptop and an internet connection, right? We don't need a farm, we don't need boats, ships, right? We don't need accountants, all the kind of other infrastructure that is required for a large scale criminal enterprise. For fraud, it's really a laptop and cash. That's really all you need to get started. And most people have those. And so that's not really a problem. And the final and maybe most important piece is there's minimal legal risk. And so if we look at and think about, I'm a fraudster living in the Netherlands, I take over an account that's The account holder is based in the UK. The company that runs that website is headquartered in the United States, but the user, and I sell it to a user in the Philippines. Who has jurisdictional authority over me selling that game account or using their loyalty points? It's probably not me, because it's going to be really hard to get local police on a case with, well, we have an IP address and a location. Probably not going to be the account holder. They don't want to get involved with a legal situation, nor do they really have the jurisdictional authority of police there.
Mm-hmm.
The account holder, or who runs the account, would maybe have some authority, but they have to take that to their local police, and they're going to look at this map and say, we can't do anything about this, right? We don't have the jurisdictional authority over the account holder, the person who stole it, or the person they sold it to. And so then that elevates it to a pretty high level of legal authority, right? You could go to the FBI and they're like, we don't care about a $5,000 account takeover event. So do you go to Interpol or the International Criminal Court? Right there, they're like, we're dealing with real problems here. Not that these aren't real problems, but we're dealing with like massive issues here. And so the jurisdictional complexity plus the low priority nature of the crime makes it really alluring. As until you rise to a certain level, you're not really going to be on an international like Interpol's or the FBI or any other similar organization's radar. And that level is like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so at a certain point, it doesn't take very much money. You don't have to know very much. You can't really go to school for drug running, but there's certainly YouTube videos and IRC chats on committing
Mm-hmm.
fraud. I don't have to have any physical. I just have to have a laptop and some cash. And it's going to be really difficult to get prosecuted, especially if I put my tracks and I cover them pretty well. So overall, it's a pretty great option, right? It's cheap, it's easy, it's not that complex. There's minimal risk. So as compared to my other opportunities, it's kind of ideal. The only downside and why it's not a massive problem is the total addressable market for stealing is not near as high as a traditional option. And so it's kind of the baby step to you can really raise funds to do the stuff you actually want to do. But for an individual, $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year is a pretty plush life for a couple hours a day.
So are you finding then that these actors they have relatively small outfits? It's to finance their own small venture, or it's to enrich their lives in some way. We're not talking about, okay.
There's a separate category for large organized or state-sponsored criminal cyber hacking. That definitely occurs, but the targets change at that point, right? When the score is $100,000, that's not worth it to the North Korean government.
Right.
But if I can steal $1 billion from a bank, that's worth it. And so from a threat surface, like we don't talk about those as much because they're not attacking the kind of institutions that we generally talk to, like individual enterprises or merchants. That's like a Federal Reserve or a large banking institution. We certainly have the tools, but that's not our area of focus all the time.
So next I want to pivot to sort of, given that they may be small enterprises that these folks are running, but they do have thoughts about how to do things efficiently, and what sort of what are they going to grab when they encounter a small business or intercept a database with all these great logins. Talk to me about how you mentioned this concept of vertical integration. So how are these criminals dealing with that, or considering like what do they do? Like, for example, if they get the database with creds, what do they do with that? And how does that benefit them really?
So really interesting in that they need to figure out how to monetize. And so we talk about vertical integration, and it's because we need to think about these organizations just like we think about traditional profit-seeking firms. It's rare that fraudsters are going to engage in this behavior for political or other means. The objective is normally financial. It definitely occurs in other ways, but from a fraud perspective, it is primarily what we see it as financial in nature. And so we should think about these firms as financial firms. And what will financial firms do? They're going to maximize profit. In that, some are vertically integrated, that they do every part of the fraud ecosystem. They take over accounts, They then test the credentials that they steal. They then acquire goods with those stolen credentials and then monetize those stolen goods. As we see in other parts of the economy, you can get more efficient at one thing and not have to worry about the thing that's maybe not that profitable. And so we can either have vertical integration or specialization. Smaller outfits might specialize in that they just do one part of the ecosystem, one part of that chain, where a larger organization is, hey, we're going to do this whole thing because we're not going to have to pay middlemen at each section, right? We don't have that loss of profit because we can go start to finish. And the real start of that is stealing credentials, right? That's the nexus of all the stolen value. Or somehow we need to gain access into accounts. So that really occurs in three main ways. That's phishing. That's our normal kind of attacks that we always see here in our security trainings of, hey, I send you an email and it says to log into this website and it looks kind of like the one you know, but it's not exactly right. It's PayPal with an I, right? So it's like a little off. There's also skimming or scraping. These are direct attacks on the page. And so while a phishing might be a totally unscrupulous or fake website, a scraping or skimming attack is an attack on a legitimate website wherein the fraudster has injected some kind of code onto that website or executable where they can then pull credentials out as you enter them. So this would be, there's a common one called the Mage Card attack that attacked a specific payment platform integration where the customer would enter their credit card credentials and then that would be sent to a third-party server. So in plain text. So I would get, your name, billing address, all the card verification details. Same thing would occur as just this is kind of like a keylogger. And so we're either scraping or skimming this information. And then the last is really just hacking. So this would be where we get into an unsecured environment and get usernames and passwords. These can be hashed or not, right? There's a ton of information about cracking hashed passwords. And if you use a kind of a lacking hash, it's pretty easy to reverse engineer what those passwords are because you have the username, so you can pretty easy match them up. So now we have credentials. So what do we do now? You're like, okay, great. We have access to stolen accounts or we have access to cards. Well, first we need to figure out how can we turn those into goods. And the first thing we need to do is validate that those credentials are good. Whether it's a stolen credit card, an account, we need to confirm access. And where we get to integration or vertical integration, this is where we would maybe see a break. That, hey, I just compromise accounts and then I sell accounts, $1 per 1,000 or $1 sometimes like per 10,000.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I'm a more sophisticated group, I might keep all my own because I can monetize each step without having to take a loss, right? That my cost of goods stolen or my cost of goods sold goes down because I don't have to buy stuff from other people. I can just use my own stuff. So, okay, now we validated the credentials. We know that, hey, this email and this password go together. We know this card is still good. So now we have to identify, okay, where can we use this credentials or these credentials that would be worthwhile? So, we could know that, hey, this username and password works. We could take it to Facebook and not real good monetization opportunities, right? What are we going to steal? We could take it to Netflix. Monetization is pretty low, but right, it's like $1 per 10 accounts, but security is pretty low. So we go, so we're doing a cost benefit analysis, just like a normal profit seeking firm. How many credentials am I going to waste because security is too high versus what am I going to get when I get through? So they do a little CBA to say, okay, so we've identified a target. Security's monetization opportunity is pretty good. So we're going to go on that one. So now we execute an attack. And either that's using the stolen credit cards to buy goods or we log into accounts. So now we've executed our attack, then we finally either gained access to the goods or we've taken control of the goods. So cool, great. Now we have tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of stolen goods. What do we do now? Right now we have to monetize. And so as part of monetization is there's really kind of four main modes, and they each have really different upsides and downsides. So you can do local sales, right? That's physical or digital goods, right? I have an iPhone that I bought for $1,000 using a stolen credit card. So my cost of goods stolen for that iPhone is like maybe $10. So, if I sell it for 500, great profit, right? Risks, right? I have to interact with someone. I have to take cash, right? I have to find a buyer, right? Fraudsters, again, act like regular businesses where what's my market opportunity for my stolen goods if I'm only selling in my local area? Um, I can reship. So I'll take control of the goods and then ship them to someone else. This is more common with physical goods, right? Downsides, I have to take control and then I have to wait for someone to buy it. So now I'm sitting in a warehouse somewhere with $10,000, $100,000 of stolen iPhones. I can have shrinkage just like a regular business, right? Stuff might fall off my truck, right? Maybe one of the
Yep.
guys in my warehouse says, oh, well, now we have 99 iPhones instead of 100. So risks, right? Then I have to pay for shipping and like the logistics, right? It's a huge pain. I can drop ship, so I can steal right as people order. So I set up a third party website or use eBay and say iPhone $500, and then when you buy it, I just steal it from the merchant and ship it directly to you. Same thing for accounts, and so that's similar drop shipping. As I wait until I have a purchase and then I go steal. So, for example, if I'm taking over quick service restaurant accounts, I'm not going to take over the account until I know I have a purchase. And so then I'll take over the account and then monetize it rather than take over the account and then just twiddle my thumbs waiting for the user to change their password or, security update. And I'm kind of SOL at that point. And then last is online marketplace. This is by far the easiest and where fraudsters want to go because I have instant cash, right? I can steal and then instantly get paid same day, right? I can probably get paid in Bitcoin or PayPal, so I don't have to deal with cash or deal with a regular e-commerce website. That's you can have some kind of fly-by-night situations online that allow you to go from goods to monetized goods pretty quickly. And so from a fraud perspective, same. And so we think about them as businesses. I don't have to hold goods. I don't have to hold inventory. I don't have to deal with cash or accounting or fees. I can just steal stuff, get paid. And so inside of all that's really how we monetize is we just really need to sell something. And so the path of least resistance is usually how they go. That said, people will do different things just like a regular business. They'll go, well, it's easier for us to do an online marketplace, but this revenue opportunity is worse. So we'll do drop shipping
Hmm.
because we can sell for uh, 80% of value rather than 50% of value. Also, if I do drop shipping, I don't have to pick what I'm going to steal, right? Then you have to get people to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to steal stuff in 4 weeks when I get it. I need to figure out what people are going to want to buy. So I have to be kind of predictive and do some market analytics of what people want to buy. That's rough, right? I don't want to deal with that. So then drop shipping or online marketplace, it's kind of just in time fulfillment in the same way that I don't acquire the goods until I'm ready to sell them.
That's all super interesting. And it makes me realize one of the reasons why it's so important for entrepreneurs to think about this. I mean, the folks watching, we come from all kinds of backgrounds. Many of us have, software businesses or businesses that are online, e-commerce or others. But it's really interesting to consider sort of what is an online marketplace and how do I, as an entrepreneur, what can I do to, and maybe even if you could speak to the individual. I know there are many students in the audience who don't yet have their venture, but for just, average people like you and I, and for entrepreneurs out there, what are the recourses that we have to stop this kind of behavior? And I'm thinking in particular, like I'm a product person by training. As a product person, how can I think about ways to make this process harder for these criminal actors?
So yeah, that's really important because as individuals, we can actually do a lot. Number one, don't buy stolen goods, right? If you see something that's unbelievably cheap, it's probably stolen, and that
Too
might
good to
not,
be true.
yeah, it might not negatively impact you, um, but it could. If you buy a stolen iPhone and then try to register that iPhone, they're going to know that it was stolen based on the number, and so somebody might come knocking, or they're going to brick the iPhone, and so negative externalities there. At the same token, you're funding some really terrible organizations, right? They might be using fraud to get started, but we've seen human trafficking, drug smuggling, terrorism is sometimes or very often, unfortunately, the end result of these stolen goods. And so don't buy stolen goods. That's the first thing you can do. At a secondary level, protect your accounts, right? Use a password manager or keep a robust password policy. What really gets people is, and how you can protect yourself, is reusing passwords online. I know it sounds silly, but it's huge. And so two-factor authentication and using a kind of a password manager or a robust password set is really going to protect you as a consumer. Um, from a business perspective, kind of do the same thing. Number one, don't think that just because you're not selling gift cards or iPhones that you're not a target for fraud. Um, if you have a great product, people are going to want to pay for it, and if people want to pay for it, um, people are then going to steal it. And so there's a market for essentially anything that has value online. So if you are comfortable charging people for it and they're comfortable paying for it, someone's probably going to steal it. We've seen people steal everything from pizza to tax software. And so it's not just
Wow.
goods, it can be services. Like think about every time you've had a weird login notification from Netflix or your iCloud. All of that stuff is monetizable. From a product perspective, you can engage in some technologies to help. And all of these really are based around dynamic friction. And so as a product person, you think, I need to keep fraud in mind of how can I ensure that I have a frictionless experience for my customers without opening the door to fraud. And so some things you can do are like real-time machine learning, is really identifying, hey, what do our good customers look like? And what do our anomalous customers look like? That way we can differentiate, provide an effortless experience for our good customers, and put some friction in front of our bad actors. The other one is you can do robust velocity checks. It seems basic now, but if you have a SaaS or some kind of service, uh, go beyond the wireless access firewall or web access firewall. Have some robust velocity checks around what you allow in terms of your environment. And so if you allow purchases, what makes sense? What some people will ask us, like, well, what's the average purchase? And it's like, well, it really changes. Like, do you sell digital downloads? Like you could have 200 orders in an hour
Right.
versus $10,000 watches. It would be odd to see more than one in multiple days. And so
Mm-hmm.
robust velocity checks around your customer behavior, whether that's in login, account change, account update, right? What's going on? And it's really like, does this look outside the range of normal? Because if it does, there's a chance that it's high risk. Um, Again, that dynamic friction of where can we put friction on our environment that rebuffs bad actors but doesn't impact our good customers? Because the easiest way to reduce fraud in either your purchasing or your login environment is just don't let anybody purchase anything, don't let anybody log in, right? If that's your kind of mindset, the only solution is just don't do business, right? Some of this is a cost of doing business, right? If you want to maximize revenue, you got to find the sweet spot between allowing people to do things that kind of don't make sense versus um, stopping everything. And so that's kind of the balance point of what makes the most sense for your business. You can also do things like dynamic fingerprinting, where we can actually uniquely identify a device and its location to say, hey, we know that this iPhone goes with this game. And so that's probably okay that they're doing something weird because, hey, we know it's them. And so device fingerprinting is kind of a nice way of reducing your threat surface. And so the real goal is, how can we make it so it's sufficiently difficult for bad actors to attack us? It's frustrating and it's really expensive, but our good customers don't notice. That's the real goal, is make friction occur. So you have to have a manual, time intensive attack with a person with a high level of technical skill and desire. That way you're like, well, this is horrible. Like, this is so expensive. I'm just going to move down the road. It's kind of that analogy is, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the next target. And so with customers,
Right.
that's the
I have to
unfortunate
outrun you,
reality.
not the bear.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Howard, so spinning off of one of these things, I want to talk about the dynamic friction piece. I mean, that is the mantra as product people and as engineers. We want to reduce, especially in financial services, it's reducing friction. We want people to, have money movement flowing freely in the marketplace. But talk to me about some things that you've seen working with customers that where it's friction, but it's acceptable to the customers. Like, I have two questions. One is, where you sit, what are you seeing as sort of acceptable points of friction from a customer experience standpoint? And the second piece is, can you share some high level examples without sharing anything you're not supposed to share, of where things that work well?
So friction, it really makes sense on how much brand damage is there at risk, right? So a customer account login or creation, if you don't have a lot of um, value locked behind an account creation, let's say you have a free service that allows people to have a basic interaction with your uh, technology. If you don't lock a lot of value behind account creation, right? You don't have like a free sign up bonus um, or something like that. There's not a lot of value. And so let's not put friction as that part of the environment because we want our customers to be comfortable. At the same token, is there brand damage if the account gets taken over? Okay, that's where we want to put more friction. And customers sometimes it can be frustrating. But if I log into my bank on a new device in Thailand and I don't get a notification, I would go,
Right. I don't, those digital bankers need some work to do, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah. No, you would expect that if you're traveling and you are in New York City suddenly, that you don't live there, that, it should prompt you. I want that email.
yeah.
I want
And
the two-factor authentication, right?
and the cool thing is that's where we talk about dynamic friction is it would be
Yeah.
really easy to say, hey, we want to say if they're outside of XYZ billing distance, do a step up.
Right.
The really fancy thing is if we can do stuff about that device or stuff about that customer via machine learning to say, hey, we know
Totally.
that this customer travels a lot and logins from a many variety of devices. And so let's not put friction there. And so the real thesis is you need to put friction where there's either brand or financial losses of potential. And so, like a payment, customers are pretty okay with friction. Checkout, oddly, not the same. So, adding a card to your wallet, they can say, okay, yeah, we want to make sure this is okay. But making a purchase, right? You wouldn't believe how many people get bent out of shape in quick service restaurants when they do a CVV prompt on a store payment, right? If you use your
Right.
Starbucks app and you're like, this is my app, like, why are you prompting me for CVV every time, right? Um, I don't use a Starbucks app, so I don't know if that's true, but CVV prompts are kind of contentious, right? Because that's more
Totally.
the frustrating friction rather than I feel protected. And so it's a balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as usual, it goes to, not know your customer in a
Yeah.
KYC way, but understand who your customer is and what that experience is. And if you do have people who are frequent world travelers, don't intercept them every time. But that's interesting. Well, I think there's a lot more we could talk about. I know we're getting close to the end here, but tell our audience where they can learn more about criminal funding.
So there's a ton of information about there. That just as much, it's really a cat and mouse game that, you know, fraudsters are working on new stuff, developing technologies. Some of them are so robust that they have customer service, they have tech support, they even have their own internal fraud departments. And so this is a very robust industry. And so it's an arms race. And inside of that, there's lots of documentation on the side of the good guys as well. Some personal ones that I really like are Darknet Diaries. It's a podcast all about, they call it the dark side of the internet. It's all about hacking and cybersecurity. If your ear started burning at that North Korean $1 billion bank heist, they have a whole episode how this North Korean fraud group, probably state sponsored, organized nearly $100 million digital bank heist. And so, the high level of depth, real actors in the environment, both good and bad. Great podcast, and they have tons of episodes. On the merchant side for risk, you can look at the Merchant Risk Council weekly fraud newsletter, where it breaks down topics and technologies that are occurring that are new. If you want a bit of a longer read and more in depth, Krebs on Security has kind of a great breakdown of weekly cybersecurity updates for people who are compromising accounts, stolen identities, as well as he has a book called Spam Nation that really breaks down how this third-party website like pharmaceutical spam really kind of funded this massive organization online, and kind of the fly-by-night payment processors that exist around the world that process some of these illegal credit card payments.
Wow, all really good resources. I now have something. I finished Stranger Things last night, so I got to move on to some other scary stuff.
Yeah.
I think the Darknet Diaries might be just the thing. Brady Harrison with Count, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure. And for those of you watching, we hope that you found this valuable. And if you have questions in the chat, We hope we were able to address those. But if they want to get in touch with you, Brady, are you findable? Are you on the Twitter? Where can they get more information if they want to reach out to you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I do have Twitter. I don't talk about cybersecurity very much on Twitter, but you can always contact me at Count. So it's brady.harrison@count.com if you'd want to chat. I love talking about fraud. If you have just other areas of interest, really, really happy to talk and discuss. We have tons of information out there, and I just can't get enough of it.
Nice. Well, we love your enthusiasm, and thank you so much for taking the time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to talk to you.
Awesome. Take care.